Welcome back to the Officer Nate podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Do you need a new pair of sunglasses? Then visit Frontline Optics at frontline-optics.com or visit them on Instagram at Frontline Optics. They are a retired firefighter-owned business out of San Diego. Their glasses were designed with the idea of being duty glasses, so their customers won't damage their expensive designer brands in the harsh environments they work in while on duty. They offer a no-questions-asked replacement program to cover anything that happens to the glasses on or off the job. 5% of every purchase is donated to the First Responders Children's Foundation, supporting the families of our brothers and sisters who were killed or disabled in service to their communities. Frontline Optics is focused on ensuring that their customers have a positive experience, so visit Frontline Optics at frontline-optics.com. I have a very informative show for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me is Sheriff Richard Mack. Sheriff Mack is a retired sheriff and law enforcement officer who served in Utah and Arizona. One of the highlights of his career was fighting for our Second Amendment freedoms in a Supreme Court case where he took on the Clinton administration, lived to tell about it, and won after the federal government attempted to pass and enforce the Brady Bill infringing on our Second Amendment rights. With his extensive knowledge and experience, Sheriff Mack travels the country teaching and instructing at various conferences and law enforcement training. He cares about the Constitution, he fights for the Constitution and your individual freedoms, so we're happy to have him on today. For the listeners and the viewers, just explain, give them kind of your background and so a bit of your personal background, but also your professional and law enforcement background.
I'm known as Sheriff Mack.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Richard I. Mack, and I was the sheriff of Graham County, Arizona for 8 years, 2 terms. I was a cop in Provo, Utah for almost 12 years. I actually started at the very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I was a meter maid in downtown Provo while I was working my way through college.
Okay.
And I was a stalker at a local grocery store, Allen Super Save, and I was a part-time meter maid, and I went around chalking tires in the little scooter, like kind of a makeshift golf cart. And I did that for about a year, and then I graduated from BYU, and I tried to get in the FBI. And my father was a retired FBI agent, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And I thank the good Lord over and over and over that never happened or materialized. And while I was waiting to hear from the FBI, I hired on full time with Provo PD as a patrol officer in 1979. Boy, I sound old, don't I? Man. So
That's back in the good old days, though.
yeah, it was. It really was. And then I was promoted to corporal, sergeant, and I did patrol sergeant duty for a little while, but then I was quickly promoted to detective. And then I did a lot of different things there. And I'm telling you, I may have mentioned this to you real briefly last time, is that the most traumatic thing, life-changing experience, was I did a year as an undercover narcotics officer. And I mean totally undercover. Changed my name, had a different driver's license, could not be seen with my wife and kids. I had 3 little kids at home at the time. And the oldest was 6.5, and the youngest was 3. And I could not go to any of their parties or ball games or church activities.
Yeah.
Nothing. Could not be seen with them in public, period. And there was one time my wife was just getting sick and tired of it. This was before cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't know where I was half the time. And she just was really getting upset with it. And I said, why don't you go home to Arizona and just stay with your family for a while and regroup and get some rest and let the kids be with the grandparents. And then while she was there, I needed some regrouping,
Yeah.
and I needed some time off. And my sergeant told me, he said, go down and spend some time with your family in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And because I could be seen with them there.
Sure.
And so we had a great time, and then I got back to work, and it was really hard for me because I grew up in a LDS family. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't do any of those things. Never smoked marijuana in my life,
Yeah.
except when I was undercover. This is the only time I've ever used pot.
Yeah.
And you know how it is. You have to protect your ID when you're around the drug scene and you're in the drug scene. You have to use some of it.
Hmm.
And that's all there is to it. And I was trained to do that, and when I was trained to assimilate or fake it, and I became very good at that.
Yeah.
But some, like a bong, you can't fake a bong. You're either taking it in or you're not.
Right.
And so, uh, and I hated beer, and I hated liquor. I hated all of it. I just hated. My wife probably hated it worse than I did.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you what, it really taught me a lot. And I have come to the conclusion, and this might be a discussion for another time, but I came to the conclusion that the drug war is a farce, and it has provided no benefit to America whatsoever. In fact, it's made things worse. And I do not support the drug war as presently constituted. I don't think we've done any good whatsoever. We have not stopped one person from using drugs. They can always get it from somebody else, and they have. And you can go to any school in America and get whatever you want by the time the bell rings at 3 o'clock. So
Yeah.
I don't think we've done any good there. And my whole picture now though is restoring liberty. And in 1983, I went to a seminar taught by Dr. Cleon Skousen,
Hmm.
and it was called The Constitution for Law Enforcement Officers. And it was a 2-day seminar approved by Post.
Hmm.
And I got 16 hours of training towards my certification as a peace officer, my continued certification requirements.
Right.
But regardless of that, I was converted to the Constitution during those 2 days. And I swore an oath to myself, besides the one that you and I have already taken when we took our jobs. But I swore an oath. I said, I'm never going to be on the wrong side again. And I'll tell you what, Nate, I was really taken aback by the lack of adherence to the Constitution by judges, by prosecutors, and by the police.
Hmm.
And I lived in this government every day, and I saw no adherence to the oath of office. I saw no concern about the oath of office, whether you took it, whether you kept it, whether you knew what it meant to take it. And how do peace officers even keep their oath of office? They don't even know how to answer that. And
Right.
and the, I've asked a lot of officers that, and their answers are very comical and strange as hell. But
Well,
when
I
I was,
think.
go ahead.
I think if I'll just jump in real quick. When I mean, a lot of officers, like you start out really young. I started out. I think I was 24. I think when I started my law enforcement career,
Yeah, I think I was
and
25.
yeah, and so you're thrown into this very important role, right, in your community or in your state or whatever level you're working at, and you're given essentially you go to the academy, and it's like a crash course with everything that is packed into the academy,
Yeah,
everything you have to learn,
sure.
all the classroom work, all the practical scenarios you have to go through.
Right.
But I don't remember, thinking back, during my time in the academy and in field training, uh, anybody ever saying to me that my role and my authority rather as a police officer is limited, right? Because that's the whole purpose of the Constitution, is to
Of course.
limit the amount of power the government has over its citizens, and so that it doesn't trample our rights.
Correct.
But I don't remember, and I don't think that this is intentional. I don't think that academies and state governments and municipality governments are out to intentionally trample people's rights. But I doesn't
They
make it any more just, right? Doesn't make
they
it any
just don't
more
know what they are. They have
right.
no clue what they are.
Yeah, but so we have to steer the ship back around because
Correct.
like I said, I was 24, 25 years old, and I sort of got caught up a little bit. I had to be put in check, whether it was by myself or maybe by a judge or somebody like that.
Hmm.
Like I have a lot of authority over people, and
Yeah.
to some extent you do, but not to the extent that a lot of officers believe they do.
Right.
And that's dangerous.
Well, I was there. I was there. I was one of them. I was part of it at first,
Yeah.
until I really started looking and doing my own research and study.
But you said that training that you went to, where I think you said it was called Constitution for Law Enforcement, sort of,
Right.
you had a sort of an awakening and a realization that,
I did.
I'm doing this all wrong.
Right.
Is that about right?
That's exactly correct. I was sincere enough about the Constitution and what's going on to want to go to that training, and I knew Dr. Skousen. He actually worked in the FBI with my father a little bit, and so I really wanted to go, and
Yeah.
I took off time to go to make sure I could go. But for the first 3 years of law enforcement, I just did what everybody else did. I
Sure.
wrote tickets. I was a nice enough guy. I mean, I didn't beat up anybody
Hmm.
and mistreat anybody, but I was out there writing tickets, and I didn't want to play second. I never wanted to be second string or sit on the bench. I wanted to be the leader in writing tickets or making arrests or DUIs and kicking in doors and whatnot. And so I was very active and into it, and I never understood the real purpose until I went to that training, and then even followed up with a lot of research on my own, and I discovered what you were talking about, and I discovered what the role of government is. Why do we have government, and why do we have police?
Hmm.
And it still falls back to what you said, and that is to participate in the limited role of government and to make sure government stays out of the people's lives,
Yes.
and that we protect their rights, civil rights. And
Hmm.
Martin Luther King, I totally love what he did, but he was arrested 30 times and never once broke a law.
Yeah.
Never once.
Yeah.
And yet Rosa Parks is another one that I use in my training. She was arrested for not giving her seat to a white man. How
Hmm.
could any peace officer in this country who swore an oath of allegiance to the Constitution arrest an American citizen for not giving her seat to a white man? And this was 1955. I
Yeah.
was 3 years old when she got arrested.
And,
So
and it's not.
it's stuff just like that.
Yeah, and that wasn't that long ago. I mean,
Oh,
some people might say 1955 was a lifetime ago, but it really wasn't. And
no.
thank God we've made tremendous strides as far as civil rights are concerned. Since that time.
But I say that government really hasn't changed. Government just finds another victim.
Yeah.
They quit picking on black Americans, but now they pick on Amish farmers,
Mm.
and they pick on gun owners,
Yeah.
and they pick on people who just want to be heard, or they pick on people who just want to be left alone.
Hmm. Yes.
And so, but yeah, that really gets to me. The one group now that I probably work with more than anything, besides the election fraud group, is Amish farmers, and Amos Miller right now in Pennsylvania is being attacked weekly, daily, monthly, and so many different farmers get it because they refuse, and these farmers have never pasteurized their dairy products.
Hmm.
And so then here comes the state, or here comes the FDA, or here comes the USDA. And it's the USDA going after Amos Miller right now. And I could give you a bunch of other names, David Hostetler, Vernon Hirschberger. And there's one in Kentucky that I was very, very close with.
Hmm.
And he got arrested and spent 6 years in prison because he wouldn't cooperate with the federal government, FDA, and he made a salve out of chickweed, and yet, what is our government really destroying there? One, their religious freedom,
Hmm.
and because this is part of their religious tenets, and it's also the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
This is their farm. This is their land. This is their home. This is their product. And they could very easily, the government could solve it real easy if they just do like they do with cigarettes. Put a warning on it.
Hmm.
But no, they got to go. And this man he got a 6-year sentence, and he spent 4.5 years in prison.
Well, and what is it that they wanted from him? Did they wanted to regulate the product that he was creating, or
Well, first
they
he said he didn't get permission. He didn't get permission to do it. And that was
to
the biggest thing.
to
but
create you said it was a
a salve
salve.
out of chickweed, and see, chickweed is not a regulated substance. It's not illegal, and
Right.
so he grew it on his farm, and he put some beeswax with it and some eucalyptus, and he sold it. And I've used it a lot. I still use it, and it's so innocuous and nothing but the government, if you don't do what they tell you, this is what they'll ultimately do. And the judge was way out of line. His name was Danny C. Reeves, and I was at his sentencing. I worked with this guy quite a bit. Worked with his sheriff to try to get him protected.
Yeah.
But the judge said this: I'm sentencing him to 6 years because he's obstinate. This is coming from a judge.
Because he
A
didn't like his
friend-
attitude. Okay.
Yeah, he's stubborn. He didn't get permission, and he showed no remorse. That's why. You get 6 years. Tell me where any of that qualifies for any amount of prison.
That's not in
And-
the
and so-
sentencing guidelines, as far as I know.
No. This.
Well,
and these-
what crime was he charged and convicted of?
Oh gosh.
It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well,
It
I know,
sounds to me
but
like
he
they're
did. I mean, he did. He had several. The jury found him guilty, but the thing of it is, he was not exactly using the right lawyer.
well, it sounds to me like it's more like religious persecution than it is anything else. I mean,
I think it is. Yeah, and nobody would ever listen to that, though. I mean, I brought that up numerous times. I said, "This is their religion."
Yeah.
I said, "I'm not Amish." But this guy has a right to be left alone and do his religion the way he wants. But nobody cared about that at all.
well, and it's like you said, the government just targets a different group, and I think right now it's religious people. You probably heard of
yeah.
that case in
course.
Colorado, where the Supreme Court just recently ruled on it. The lady who is a website designer, named Lori Smith, she lives in Colorado, and Colorado has an anti-discrimination law. That you can't, people who do businesses, entrepreneurs can't discriminate against their potential clientele based on sexual orientation.
Right.
Well, Lori Smith is a Christian woman who designs wedding websites, and if she, if she were to be approached by a gay couple to create a wedding website for them, that would be antithetical to her religious beliefs, and she knew that if she were to refuse service to someone like that she would be in violation of Colorado's state law, which is in violation of her First Amendment right to, for the free speech clause, but then also the free exercise of religion clause. So
Whatever happened to refusing service to whomever I want? I mean, it's my business. If I don't like you or if I don't want to do business with you, I don't have to tell you why.
Right.
But
Right.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to me that in these blue states, that's long gone. And
Oh yeah.
but and she sued the state of Colorado, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually ruled in her favor. Thank goodness. But she was just attacked from all sides. I mean, from the left. Being a hateful Christian person, and why are you so bigoted? Why do you hate gay people? And it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the government compelling speech. The government has no business to tell you what you should and should not put on your website. I mean, within reason, unless it's harmful to children or something like that. But if it's something that is, counter to, what you believe as a religious person, whatever religion that is, doesn't matter, Christianity, Islam, whatever. The government has no business to tell you what sort of messages you're supposed to convey, whether it's on a website or on a banner or what sort of flag you want to fly. But they're doing it in states like Colorado. That's exactly what they're doing with these anti-discrimination laws, and they're targeting religious people, just like your Amish friends.
Right.
So, but I wanted to go back real quick to this war on drugs, because I totally agree with you. I spent some time in narcotics. I did some undercover work. I didn't go as deep as you did. I didn't have to get a new ID or anything like that. But, I bought some, some dope here and there, going undercover. But it's frustrating to me that in Idaho is surrounded by states that have all decriminalized at least marijuana, right?
Right.
I mean, you've got Washington and Oregon that have decriminalized everything, and but Utah has I think Utah has medicinal marijuana. I don't know if they have it recreationally decriminalized it,
I don't think they have recreational.
but Idaho still. I mean, everything's illegal in Idaho still, and I
Right.
agree with you. I don't. It's so funny because that was one of my main focuses when I was on patrol was drug interdiction, and I made hundreds and hundreds of drug arrests. And every time I took somebody to the jail, the deputy that was there to do the intake, they just roll their eyes because they'd ask what the charge was, and it'd be like, oh, possession. And they're like, oh my god, like what are we doing? Why are we packing our jail with these people? We're not going to
That
win.
sounds so familiar.
Yeah. And at the time, I didn't understand. I'm like, well, I'm just doing my job. Why is it such a big deal to you? But now I understand a little bit better because those deputies in the jail, they see more of the process than we do. They're taking these guys down to court. They're giving them their phone calls. They see them meet with their attorneys and things like that. Just the amount of money that we spend prosecuting even just those misdemeanor possession charges when we could. I mean, decriminalize it, regulate it. The tax revenue would be off the charts if.
And they've never hurt anybody.
Yeah.
And hey, they said, well, we're going to have all sorts of drunk driving with marijuana. I said, arrest them then. No one's saying drunk driving is okay. I don't care I don't care if you're on prescription drugs and you're driving drunk. I've arrested people for driving drunk on prescription drugs before.
Yeah.
Arrest them,
Yeah.
but otherwise leave them alone.
Yeah, if they're smoking weed in their home, who are they hurting? No, nobody.
I don't care.
And so I agree. I mean, it's a victimless crime in most cases. Generally speaking, drug possession is a victimless crime. I mean, don't sell it to kids. At school, don't like you said, don't drive while you're intoxicated, while you're under the influence of these substances. But other than that, it's just
people alone.
It's an example of government overreach, in my opinion. And one of my realizations about the way I was doing things incorrectly as far as adherence to the Constitution, it was very subtle, but it taught me a huge lesson. I was on patrol and I had stopped this woman. It looked like she was driving drunk. There was a driving pattern. I pull over, but it's Halloween. It's Halloween night and it's cold, and she's wearing a very skimpy outfit. And I had to get her out of the car to do field sobriety tests. And so she was freezing. And she's like, can I have my coat? And I said, yeah, sure. I said, where is it? She pointed it out to me. And I grabbed her coat and I said, I just need to make sure there's no weapons in here. And so I'm digging through her pockets and I find a marijuana pipe. And I cited her for it. And it turns out she wasn't over the legal limit as far as alcohol goes. And so I gave her a ticket. Well, she fought that ticket. And she told the judge that I didn't have the right to go into her pockets of her coat. And she was right. I didn't. I could have, did a little pat down, cursory sort of pat down of the coat to see if there was anything that might have been a weapon. But as far as just diving into her pockets, that was a violation of her Fourth Amendment rights. And the judge ruled in her favor. And I was
good for him.
I was grateful for that. And I'm still good friends with that judge to this day because it taught me a huge lesson. I mean, if you think about, this is what I always go back to when it comes to how law enforcement officers treat members of the public. If that was my mom, my sister, my daughter, me, how do I want to be treated? Is it right for an officer to pull me over and just to start searching through the pockets of my coat? No, it's not. Yeah. Right. And at the time, again, I was a young officer. I'm like, well, this is for officer safety. It's not, there's nothing wrong with me doing this.
Well, if you had asked her if you could check the pockets,
right,
you'd have been fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And she might not have said yes because she probably knew there was a pop pipe in there. But still, I mean, I understand your point. Get consent or articulate a little better that why you're doing this for officer safety reasons. Now, it may still not be justified because officer safety isn't that's not just carte blanche to just do whatever you want, and for citizens to not have any recourse when their rights have been violated. So that was a great learning experience for me, taking me back to, okay, what is my role supposed to be as a police officer? Where are my boundaries? Where are my limits? Because I think a lot of cops, like we've already talked about, they get caught up in doing their jobs. They forget, okay, there's a boundary here that I'm not supposed to cross. They don't think about it that way very often.
No. And that's the training we provide. But the thing of it is, it basically boils down to this. One, we delve into our CSPOA. Well, I didn't even say what that is yet. I own an organization. I formed an organization about 13 years ago, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org, CSPOA. And all Americans, every citizen, everybody can join, everybody can donate, because I really believe this is one of the fundamental solutions, is that we teach and train and make sure that peace officers are, one, never violating your rights, but they never allow anyone else to do that either. And so if the sheriff really was standing up for, Sam Gerard was the one in Kentucky, the Amish farmer that got 6 years. Sam Gerard had a decent sheriff that wanted to protect him from the FDA coming in and hauling him off. But they sneaked in late at night and hauled him off anyway. And the sheriff wanted to make sure that he was getting a fair shake. But all this, the whole CSPOA and all of this for me stems from what I did when I was sheriff, and I did something quite unique in American history. In 1994, I became the first sheriff in American history to actually launch a major lawsuit against the federal government, against the Clinton administration, regarding the Brady Bill. And the Brady Bill was the first time in history that the federal government promulgated some gun control legislation, i.e. the Brady Bill. And though this, another first, they were going to require by law and by force to have the sheriffs of this country enforce it. And I was a rookie sheriff kind of. I had only been in office 5 years when this happened. I was the youngest sheriff in the state. And I said, there's no way, I already know the Constitution. I said, there's no way the federal government can tell sheriffs what to do.
Right.
We don't work for them. They don't pay our salary. They can't fire me. They can't hire me. It was just so stupid. And when the BATF showed up to our meeting and said, here's your marching orders as to how all you sheriffs will conduct yourself and enforce the Brady Bill. And I even told them, I was being nice. I wasn't mean or anything, to him. I was still being unsure, even though the other sheriffs were cussing up a storm about this whole thing.
Yeah.
I said, you guys know we don't work for you.
Right.
Oh, and then one of them goes, there was 3 of them, and we only have 15 sheriffs in Arizona, and we only had 13 at the meeting, but it takes 3 of them to come, I guess they thought they were going to need backup.
Yeah.
But anyway, he says, well, Congress passed a law. And I said, I don't care if Congress passed 500 laws. I don't work for you. None of us do.
Yeah.
And they did this nationwide. This was a nationwide deal. Anyway, we ultimately went to the Supreme Court and we won. And so
Yeah.
I wrote up a little Reader's Digest version of it. And every American should have this in their pocket. This is the most powerful state sovereignty, states' rights. Get off our backs and limit government. This really does it all right here. Justice Scalia wrote the decision, and he says some things in here that are just phenomenal. And I could quote all sorts of stuff from here. And one of the main things it says, and it takes this to the next level, it dissects this. But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions.
Okay.
And that's the whole thing. It is so true. And Scalia said this, and I said, I can't believe he went this far. I never thought it would go this far. And this was finally telling them they threatened in the Brady Bill. It threatens to arrest the sheriffs if we failed to comply. Arrest us if we don't go along with their unconstitutional, stupid law. And so we won, and it was primarily because of that threat of arrest. That was the big thing that the district and circuit judges really got upset about. And then Scalia really did a terrific job on this. And I met him one time, and I asked him, I said, do you remember my case? And he goes, yes. He said it was one of the most important cases I ever worked on. And I'm so glad that he wrote it. And so
what was the name of that? What was the name of that court case?
Prince. Prince was the Montana sheriff that joined me in the case. And the reason it has Prince is, though I was the primary litigant, and he and I just spoke because the 27th of June was the 26th anniversary of our case coming out of the Supreme Court. So the decision came out June 27, 1997. And so the 2 of us went to it. My name's on it. My
Hmm.
name's in there. So he and I both went to the Supreme Court together. Prince, Prantz, good man. And seriously, it's the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of America. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud to know the sheriffs that joined us in this lawsuit. 7 sheriffs nationwide did the lawsuit. 7.
Only
Two of us
7.
ended, two of us ended up at the Supreme Court. And again, it's the Prince v. U.S. decision. It was called the Mack Prince case because we were consolidated at the circuit court, the Ninth Circuit in California. And then I don't know why it just went to Prince for some reason, but God bless them for doing it. I got a lot of press out of it, and now my career and livelihood is based on this whole thing. Do you want? Ask every American. Do you want a constitutional sheriff in your county that will defend your rights and make sure that you're being uh, lawfully protected and that the Constitution is the supreme law in your county? Do you
Yeah.
want that?
Yeah.
Then join us in this. Join
What
us.
what specifically did they want you to enforce that they would
Oh,
threaten to arrest you if you didn't? What were the
background checks, waiting periods. And the thing of it is, what's crazy is they were actually asking us to break the law, not just the Second Amendment,
Yeah.
but we had to delve into mental history backgrounds. We didn't have any access to that.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was against the law to try to go get it.
So in order for people to own a gun, they had to come to the county and apply in order to in order to go buy a gun, and then they had to do a background check, and there had to be a waiting period, and then ultimately it had to be approved by the sheriff essentially for
Correct.
someone to go and buy a gun.
And who wants that kind of authority? I don't want that. I don't want to say who can and cannot have a gun.
Yeah,
And yeah, it was astonishing.
that's crazy. Well, and not to mention the fact that I mean, how many resources and man hours would that take to process? I mean, I would imagine all of those there would probably tens of thousands of applications that you would have to
Right. Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Well, we were a small area, so we only had like 2 or 3 gun shops. But the ones in the city, all of them came through us. Didn't say
Wow.
that the chief of police had to do it, but there's one funny thing about all this. The Brady bill and the decision by the Supreme Court, both in the Brady bill, it called us the Cleos, the Cleo of every county, the Cleo of every jurisdiction. Well, chief law enforcement officer. Well,
Hmm.
guess who they determined was the chief law enforcement officer? The sheriff.
Yeah.
And in every state it was that way, except for the 3 states that didn't have sheriff. Well, even Connecticut had sheriffs back then, but since then Connecticut got rid of the office of sheriff. They
Oh,
got rid of
really?
it. Yeah.
Huh.
So there's no sheriffs in Alaska, Hawaii, or Connecticut.
So, who is the chief law enforcement officer? I mean, did they have counties still? I'm assuming, or
They
parishes?
well, in Alaska it's boroughs,
Okay.
and Alaska, and I believe that Hawaii has counties, pretty sure,
Uh-huh.
but they just have city police and state police. And they do have the office of sheriff, but he's a security guard for the state legislature and for courts. He's not a cop. He's just a security guard.
That's
And
interesting. So they
then
don't have an elected
no
those.
elected sheriff. No
Huh.
elected sheriff. No. And Connecticut just has a state police or the police state, if you ask me.
What do you think the implications of that are? I mean, if you don't have a law enforcement authority that you elect as a as a private citizen, what does that mean for citizens in those counties in those states?
They do not have, well, first of all, it destroys the constitutional republic. In a republic, the people choose. We, the people, bestow all power in this country. We bestow all offices. We bestow all authority, and we delegate that to the people we select.
Yeah.
Well, a chief of police, I don't mean to demean
Belittle.
him in any way,
Sure.
but he's a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
The sheriff is the employee of the people, and he answers directly to them. He has no other supervisor. Most people don't get that or understand that. Some sheriffs don't get it.
Yeah.
You answer to the people, and
Hmm.
that's why we are a people oriented. We, the people, we are in charge of this government. We tell you what you are to do, and we appoint you to office. Now they want to just make it to where sheriffs are appointed, especially after sheriffs the last 3 years told the governors to hang it that they weren't going to arrest people for not wearing a mask, and they weren't going to shut businesses down, and they weren't going to shut school boards down, and they weren't going to arrest people for going to school boards and complaining. And so sheriffs really rose up big time. And there's another one. The sheriffs of this country are pretty united on the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And so we're defending, what are we doing? We're defending the Constitution against our own government.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is right now.
Well, and I think the framers of the Constitution, I think they had anticipated that would be the case
They
at
knew
some
it would
point.
happen.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's part of that Colorado case that I mentioned is, as far as religious liberty and, and things like that. One of the reasons that religion is in the First Amendment, and it's the very first fundamental freedom mentioned in the First Amendment, because
It is.
they understood, the framers, right, the founding fathers understood, because of what was going on in England and Europe at the time with a government established religion, that eventually our own government would come after its citizens because of their religious beliefs. And they would target you because of your religious beliefs, and they would try, they would prosecute you, jail you, persecute, whatever that looks, whatever sort of oppression or whatever degree of oppression that looks like, the government would eventually try to accomplish that. And so I think, there's a reason freedom of speech and gun ownership are the first two, because
Exactly.
if you think about it, those are what are constantly under attack from the people who are in authority, and especially when it comes from the left. The censorship of speech, suppression of speech, especially of your political opponents. And they've been trying to enact gun legislation for decades, more and more. They take little by little.
The Brady Bill actually amended the Federal Gun Control Act of 1968.
Really?
And so, this was quite a historical decision, because it actually stopped the federal government for, and most people and most scholars, and I agree with them, that this bought the Second Amendment. Our lawsuit bought the Second Amendment about 25 years from the government, because there were five Brady bills. There were actually five Brady bills scheduled to be passed one year after the other, until they were going to completely gut the Second Amendment and stop gun shows and regulate FFLs out of business. And yet we stopped because of our lawsuit. Brady Bills 2, 3, 4, and 5 were never brought up again. Howard Metzenbaum introduced Brady Bill 2 just 2 weeks after I filed lawsuit.
Wow.
And so they said, hey, we're in the middle of a lawsuit with these sheriffs. Let's see how the first one does in court. Then after that, none of them came up ever again. So we changed history. A couple of sheriffs, a handful of sheriffs changed history, and most people don't know it.
It's pretty remarkable how, because like you said, it was Justice Scalia or Alito?
Scalia did it.
Scalia. If a Supreme Court justice points out that this is one of the most important cases I've ever made a decision on,
right?
That's pretty remarkable.
And there was another thing to back that up. I was told by CBS News and other people and lawyers who follow the Supreme Court, they said the most important decisions, just like recently, those decisions that you're just talking about that came out about all of this, the most important decisions are saved for the last day. Ours came out the last day, June 27, 1997. It was the end of the session, just like right now. Their session just ended a few days ago. Wow. And the most important decisions are saved for last. But the Clinton administration and the media tried to downplay this decision, and it's been largely hidden. I'm the only one out there, saying, hey, look at this case. Yeah. And this is the review of the case. I'm telling you, everybody, you should be getting this. Go to cspoa.org and get this. It has all the American flags on it, front and back. You should read this. It will amaze you, and you should pass it out to every public official in your area.
Yeah, that's and I'm going to do that. As a matter of fact, after we're done here, I'm going to go to your website and order that and start spreading the word, because it's I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot. I mean, in recent weeks, there hasn't been a lot of chirping about gun legislation. But it's only a matter of time before something happens, and the Democrats want to push for gun control and and gun laws and do whatever they can to, like you said, try and gut the Second Amendment,
Right.
because that's been on their agenda for as far back as I can remember.
Yep.
So, and even further back, you can attest to that. I was in high school when you were fighting that fight, and thank God that you were fighting it.
Yeah, well, I wanted to bring up something, and it wasn't amazing. It changed my life. Two things really changed my life: my undercover assignment and this case. And it changed our whole family, changed my wife and my life. It was just an amazing, miraculous thing to actually get a case to the Supreme Court. Are you kidding? They take 1% of their cases, 1%, and then actually win.
Yeah.
That's absolutely unheard of, and especially law enforcement, sheriffs. Oh my gosh! But this is the main thing about what I think cops need to know and understand. The Bill of Rights.
Right.
You should get the first 10 and memorize what each one is about. You don't have to memorize them word for word, but you should know what each one is about. Like the Eighth Amendment. Do cops know and understand that we are a part of breaking the Eighth Amendment every day we get out there on patrol? Because it says no excessive fines or bail, nor cruel and unusual punishment. Excessive fines. Where do we do that every day, officer? It's
Traffic
called
stops.
seatbelt tickets and traffic stops and traffic tickets and all this money. When I first got elected, the chairman of the board came up to me and said, of the county commissioners, said, "Hey, man, we're sure glad you got to be sheriff. The other sheriffs wouldn't ever write tickets, and we know you will." And I said, "Why? Is there a real bad traffic problem in the county?" "No, we just need the money." And I said,
Oh my
"You
goodness.
got the wrong guy. I'm not a tax collector. I will
Yeah.
not be a tax collector. If you need to raise taxes, raise taxes. But
Right.
I'm not going to go out and be your little tax collector by writing tickets to the people. If somebody needs a ticket, we'll write it. But otherwise, we're not going to be out there running radar all day and running tickets. We really want to get out there and mingle with the people and really serve them and take care of them, not gouge them with a bunch of stupid tickets."
And that was one of my philosophies, especially later on in my career, is that I wasn't going to, because if you think about it, a traffic citation is probably the best way to alienate the general public from law enforcement.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a moving
It is.
violation, because, they've got this big fine they got to pay, and now their insurance premiums are going to go up for the next 3 years. And
Biggest problem right there.
Yeah.
Biggest problem. That is absolutely unheard of. How is it that government is working for the insurance companies? We
Exactly.
are.
Yeah.
And so back to the Bill of Rights for a minute. Do we understand where these came from? Why the Bill of Rights? What was the purpose and intent of the founding fathers in devising a Declaration of Rights that came 2 years after the rest of the original Constitution? What was the Bill of Rights for? And if we could just get everybody in this country to understand that, and especially teach this in academies and law schools, that the purpose of the Bill of Rights was a declaration of rights that government could never alter or change. They cannot. In fact, I call these, Nate, the untouchables. This is a list of the untouchables that government cannot touch.
Yeah.
And so there's about 27 or 28 principles of freedom, as you mentioned, and number one, the First Amendment, has 5.
Yeah.
The Sixth Amendment is talking about due process, and it has about 8 or 9, depending on how you count them. Like, is cruel and unusual punishment, is that 1 or is that 2? Is excessive
Right.
fines or bail, is that 1 or 2? But when you count them, you could go with 27, maybe as many as 30. But they're very vital to the performance and limitations on government.
Yeah.
And so when you really study it, why did they mention and put number 2 as the right of the people to keep and bear arms?
Yeah.
A well-regulated militia. What does that mean? And do we understand that? And do we understand the role of government in preserving these fundamental civil rights, these God-given rights, these rights that we received when we were born because they come from nature or nature's God.
Yeah.
And so why did they do that? Because they wanted to make sure there was a list of rights that government could not touch, which means the only role that government has lawfully regarding your right and my right to keep and bear arms is to guarantee it.
Yeah.
And that's the only role the federal government has. They must guarantee your right and my right to self-defense and our right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. And that self-defense means against tyrannical government.
Yeah. Well, and again, the framers of the Constitution really understood what an oppressive government looked like.
Of course,
And
they just lived through it.
yeah, what the consequences of that were, and what kind of suffering and grief and unhappiness, again going back to the pursuit of happiness, what sort of unhappiness that causes in people's lives. And that's why they drafted the Bill of Rights, is because of what they went through, because of their experiences.
Right.
And
They
so
didn't want any of those repeated. They wanted none of the abuses of King George III repeated, and that's why they came up with those 10 amendments and those 29 principles.
And so many people don't understand that. They don't understand that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, that those were created from a place of protection, right? Wanting to protect the citizens from the government. They think that the Constitution is, when we get into the far left and the woke crowd, they believe that the Constitution is somehow punitive because it doesn't allow them to allow the government to trample on certain people's rights, but not others, which is what we're seeing very recently, with this case in Colorado. LGBTQ rights are paramount.
Action.
Yes.
And affirmative action.
Yeah.
Good. We can trample the white, poor white boy who worked his whole life helping his family and worked and worked and worked and finished first on his SAT and to go to college, and yet it's some other minority that gets in the way and he doesn't get to go to college at all.
Right.
Unless he changes to another sub-university. Now, making those judgments through the color of your skin is not the answer to discrimination.
Yeah, more discrimination isn't the answer to discrimination. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and the people that are so outraged by the Supreme Court's decision to do away with affirmative action, it's almost like they don't hear what they're saying. They're not hearing themselves speak. You claim that race shouldn't be a factor, that race shouldn't be seen at all, yet you're wanting colleges to admit their students based on race.
Right.
But does your race? What I'm to understand is that the implication is that certain races are better suited for college than other races, which is why they are being admitted based on the color of their skin. If that's not racial discrimination, I don't know what is.
And the court almost naively follows the Constitution and says this is wrong. You can't base it on that. So we're just trying to show you what the Constitution says. And then hear all the Democrats, the Constitution be damned. We need to do this anyway. The Constitution doesn't know anything. It's just the supreme law of the land. And we need to help people and do this anyway. Like the blacks are now being told, you need help. You can't do this on your own.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe if you just make it equal for everybody, I'll come out and do my job, and I'll come out where I need to come out. And what I have seen, the smartest people, I was a school teacher for a while, and I had blacks and Asians and Hispanics and a few whites, and it didn't matter to any of us what color we were, and it certainly didn't matter to me. I even had Muslims, and I loved them all, and they loved me. We got along great with all of the races, and I would ask them about affirmative action. Do you think that's fair and honest? And then we find out that the Constitution protects the civil rights of all people.
Yeah. And
the equal playing field is the only thing that government's supposed to guarantee.
Right.
And that, so backwards now that it's embarrassing and they don't get it. They
No,
really don't get it, and that's the problem is we don't teach the Constitution in our schools anymore.
no. And, going back to, this sort of, this, if you want to talk about implicit bias and the unconscious bias or racism, the right is often accused of that, of being guilty of that. But I want to read you this tweet that I actually screenshotted and posted to Instagram because I couldn't help but just laugh at the irony of it, because this is a liberal creator on Twitter, and she posted today's Supreme Court, the affirmative action decision. Today's Supreme Court decision is a direct attack on black people. No black person will be able to succeed in a merit-based system.
Oh, for God's sakes!
Wow, that's how little you think of the black community.
That's really the most racist statement I've ever heard.
And then she was getting so much backlash from it. She tried to backpedal, and she said the intention of my tweet is to highlight that prior to affirmative action, there existed a supposedly merit-based system for black individuals to gain admission. So she really just kept digging the hole deeper and deeper. But she said the quiet part out loud. The people who claim to fight against racial injustice and for equal rights, they don't care about those marginalized communities. They don't. They're some of the most racist people I've ever met. The only reason that they do the things that they do is because they know that it's an affront or an attack on their political opponents. That's the only reason they do it. They don't care about those individuals that are trying to get into college or that are trying to get jobs, that are trying to get out of poverty. They don't care about that. They care about sabotaging their political opponents' agenda, platform, whatever it is that their political opponents are trying to accomplish. They want to throw a wrench in the gears. And so that's what they're screaming about. But then they end up shooting themselves in the foot with comments like that.
Oh, totally. And the other one was almost as bad. The discrimination of saying, we'll help you not have to pay your student loans back. You know what? Am I the only person that has brought this up? What in the hell is the government giving loans in the first place for? Right. Is that the role of government, to give loans for people to go to school?
Yeah, and then, because that's our tax money.
And then you say, exactly. And there is nothing authorized for that. Not in the Department of Education. In fact, the Department of Education isn't even authorized itself. But then they come together and say, oh, well, let's give loans to people who, we'll help them get their, and then, the ones that can't pay. What about the ones that didn't go to college? What about the people who started their own business, bought a truck? Nobody paid that truck off for them.
Yeah.
They did it.
Right.
And now you want to discriminate against that person and say, well, you're a louse, but no, these people need help with their school loans. Well, I needed help with my car loan.
Yeah.
What difference does it make?
Yeah, I needed help getting my business off the ground.
It's and it's just pick and choose, and who's the winner and who's the loser here, and government needs to stay out of it, and there should not be a student loan service by the United States federal government. Is there anything they're not in charge of? The Constitution was specifically designed to keep government limited, federal government limited, and if you read the Constitution, the federal government does not even have 40 powers. You could say 38 or 39, but it's not even 40.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, how many have they stolen? How many have they usurped? How many powers has the federal government, just the FBI, how many have they stolen? The DEA, how many have they stolen? Mm-hmm. And do you know where the DEA has allowable jurisdiction into the interdiction of drugs? The border. That's right. It. It's the only place they have it constitutionally. And how are they doing there? They're letting them all through.
Yeah.
And so there's treason going on at the border. There's more drugs coming into our country than ever before. And if Biden says the border's secure, then the media back him on it. And the rest of the Democrats go and vote for him again. And this whole thing is just a political treason happening at the border, happening across our country. And Abraham Lincoln warned us that we would never be destroyed by an outside enemy. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening right now, folks. We are destroying ourselves, and we need our hero sheriffs to stand up with the people. They cannot do it alone. You are his boss. You are part of his posse. You are his volunteers to help him take back America, county by county, one good sheriff and a group of people standing with him at a time. We take back America, one county at a time. It will not happen in the corrupt cesspool of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's so funny when you talk about the DEA, and they're the one constitutional authority that they have, to secure the border, or to at least enforce drug laws at the border. They're
Right.
letting drugs pour through the border, and then they're investigating American citizens for whatever drug crimes that they believe that they are committing. Right. And you're right. The federal government regulates almost everything. You talk about these bodies like the FDA and the SEC, things like that. It's just
EPA.
everything is regulated by the federal government. And I mean, if you talk about limitations on what the government is, what sort of influence they're supposed to have over the lives of American citizens, we've let that go way too far.
Way, way, way. And, people would hold out their hand. It happened big time during the Great Depression. People were hungry, people were in lines. And of course, the federal government then, FDR, Mr. Progressive and Mr. Socialist, let's just give people, give them jobs, give them food, give them clothes, give them whatever. And it was one of the worst times in American history where we really changed to where we wanted government to take care of us. Instead of us knowing and understanding that we're here to pursue our own happiness and that we're here to take care of ourselves and to even, as the Constitution, the Constitution's intent, govern ourselves. And we don't need government taking care of us at every level, and this from the cradle to the grave of government taking care of us. That is not the role of government, especially in the United States.
Well, and I think it all boils down to education, because like you said, if you have people, so many people with their hand out, looking up to the federal government with their hand out, and right now it's not about food or about jobs. Right now it's about social justice. Yeah. I just saw yesterday that the state of Michigan passed a bill making it a felony punishable by up to 5 years and up to $10,000 that people who feel threatened by speech are victims, and the person who said whatever was offensive or threatening can be prosecuted and punished up to those particular penalties. And we're seeing people, and this is coming from the left, people wanting the federal government to prosecute and punish people who say things that they don't agree with.
Oh yeah, totally.
People, if you say something offensive, okay, I'm going to call the police, file a report. This guy said something that I don't agree with. It made me feel threatened. It made me feel unsafe. Even it could be something completely innocuous. And I don't know how on earth they are going to, who is going to be the arbiter of what's qualifies as offensive or threatening.
You're saying you're laying the framework for our solution. If the police, if law enforcement and sheriffs and deputies and patrol officers and detectives, all of them are not aware of this, and then making sure they're not arresting people for these types of stupid things.
Yeah.
And that we keep our oath of office to the Constitution, and we uphold and defend the Bill of Rights, then we're not going to have to worry about this stupid law. But if we get officers who enforce stupid laws, that is the essence of tyranny.
Yeah.
And
no, you're absolutely right. And
we just made ourselves redcoats.
And I saw some of that, when I was working in Bellevue, Idaho, my last 6 months in law enforcement. I got hired in 2020, the very end of 2020, going into 2021, and the city council, they had passed ordinances in Bellevue, Haley, Ketchum, and Sun Valley. There's these 5 little areas that all kind of lay on the Highway 93 running north and south. They all passed ordinances mandating mask wearing in public places. And we would get so many calls from people who wanted to report someone wasn't wearing a mask in the grocery store. Finally, the sheriff of Blaine County said, "We're not responding to that. We're not responding to those calls.
Right.
That's absolutely ridiculous." So finally, he directed his dispatchers, let me know if there's a call, but we're not dispatching deputies to go deal with that. That's absolute nonsense. I don't care what the city council says. I don't care what they passed. We're not enforcing that crap.
And
so you're right. That's what it's going to take.
It's always been up to us. It's called police discretion. I do not have to write you a ticket if you run a stop sign. There's nothing that says I do. If you commit some other crime, how I spank your hand or arrest you or follow up with it is my choice. It's police discretion. And now they're acting like, because now the CSPOA is training officers to think and to support and defend the Constitution. Oh no, you don't get to pick and choose. You're right, we don't. We swore an oath to the Constitution. Anything contrary to the Constitution violates my oath. I will not violate my oath.
Yeah.
There.
Yep. But you're right. We need more. We need more chiefs of police to get on board with this too, because like you said, there's a lot of chiefs out there who are just bureaucrats. They're trying to keep their salaries. They're trying to keep their jobs until they retire. I had a couple of chiefs that were like that. They were just so out of touch. It seems like there's a threshold you cross as you climb
they don't
that,
answer to the
that
people.
ladder.
They answer to the city council or to the town manager. They don't answer to the people.
Right. And that's the problem is, because I don't know what it is about city councils, at least in the areas that I've policed in, but they come up with some of the most radical, wildest ordinances and regulations that you can think of. And then you're right. I mean, chiefs they're appointed by the city council or by a city manager or whoever's, in charge of that. And so of course they're beholden to do their bidding. Otherwise they're going to lose their job. And yeah, they want to keep their job. They want to keep that 6-figure salary. But I think that, like you said, that's where sheriffs are so important, because they're not beholden to that. They're elected by the people. And so their decisions and their actions aren't controlled by bureaucrats.
And one other thing I'd like to remind everybody, we have a sheriff that has really stood strong. A constitutional sheriff in Nebraska, Dundee County, Sheriff Clinton Smith. And Sheriff Smith is fighting for his job. The state is going after his certification as a peace officer. And he ran for office. He was elected by a landslide. He took office January 5th of this year. And then he stood against the pistol brace that the BATF capriciously, just arbitrarily said, well, it's against the law to have a pistol brace now. Yeah, we allowed it for the last 25 years, but it's against the law and you'll be a felon now. And that's the kind of stupidity that we get from these bureaucrats and bureaucracies in Washington, D.C. Now, after that, they're going after him to take his job away from him. They're trying to remove him from office. And we're going to hire him a lawyer. And we need to raise money for his legal fees. Folks, we really need your help. You can make any of those donations for Sheriff Smith at cspoa.org. Let's make this man stay in office. Let's help him. And he's one of the best top 10 constitutional sheriffs in the country, and they're trying to get rid of him. Please bless this man. It'll bless our country. It'll bless him and his family, and it'll bless all of us. With your donations, directly, 100% of it goes to him and for his legal expenses. If we get him the right lawyer, he's going to win this easy.
That's good to know. What was the name of that website again, just for the viewers?
CSPOA.org, Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association, CSPOA, CSPOA.org.
And that's also where they can order a copy of your booklet. Yeah.
I've got lots of other books there where I actually make a little money. We don't make hardly a dime on this. It only costs $2 or $3. You can get like 5 for $10.
Awesome. Well, Sheriff, this has been fun and enlightening, and we have a lot more to talk about. So we're gonna have to schedule another one of these, because we could go on for hours and hours. But
that's what happens when you get two former cops together.
That's right. We have a lot to say and a lot to complain about. But no, this has been good. I appreciate you joining me, and I know that the listeners and the viewers are going to they're going to learn something. And I guess if you can take away anything, it would probably be your experience and what you were able to accomplish with that lawsuit, that Brady Bill lawsuit. And I don't know if anybody will truly understand the implications if you hadn't have been successful. Like you said, there were 3 or 4 other portions of that bill that were going to be enacted. So that's why it's important that people like you and everyone else stand up and fight. If there's an injustice, if there's government overreach, if there's an infringement, don't just stand there. Don't just sit back and take it. You got to do something about it. And it starts with our rank and file police officers.
It does.
Like you said, if there's an unconstitutional mandate or law or ordinance, you don't have to enforce it. It says right there in your oath of office, you don't have to enforce that. Doesn't matter if they threaten you with your job, with your salary. I have confidence and faith in our Supreme Court, because it's because of them, I believe, that we've maintained our constitutional republic through the last couple of years, despite what the federal government tried to mandate during the pandemic. So I think the Supreme Court, at least the Supreme Court we have right now, will have your back if you stand up to that kind of corruption. So
at least until the Democrats change that.
Until they pack the court.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for now, I think we're okay. So we'll have to figure out a way to prevent the Democrats from doing that. But well, Sheriff, thanks again, and we'll keep in touch, and we'll figure out when to schedule this again.
Thanks, Officer Nate. It's a privilege to be with you, and I really enjoy our friendship, and thanks for what you've done for America as well.
Likewise. Thanks a lot, Sheriff.